When I turned 68, I had a private banker on speed dial, 3 homes in 3 different states, and more money than I could ever spend in 100 lifetimes. I also had only one child, Daniel, a doctor, a man with his father's eyes and his mother's silence. On the morning of my birthday, I woke up alone waiting for his call. Just like every other year, I expected a voicemail. "Happy birthday, Mom," he'd say. "Sorry I'm running late. Surgery went long." But that morning the phone rang differently. It wasn't his voice. It was a police officer. Calm. Cold. Almost rehearsed. My son had been hit by a drunk driver just minutes after finishing a night shift. Killed instantly. No chance for goodbye. No time for closure. Just silence. People think grief is loud. Crying, screaming, breaking down. Mine was quiet. Like a glass cracking slowly from the inside. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I made a cup of coffee. I didn't drink. I sat at the table where no one would sit with me anymore. He was my only child. And in a single second, I became a mother to no one. That's how it started. A woman with billions in the bank. And no one left to call her mom. But just when I thought everything ended, something I never expected showed up at his grave. And what happened next changed the way I saw my son. And myself. English. My name is Eleanor. I'm a 68-year-old woman who thought she had it all, until I realized I had no one. This is the story of how I lost my son, then discovered the family he never told me about. But before I share my story with you, I'd love to know you're here with me. Drop a simple hi in the comments or let me know where you're watching from. Sometimes knowing someone is listening makes all the difference. And if you feel something from my story, please consider subscribing to this channel. It's free. And maybe, just maybe, it tells the algorithm that stories from people like me still matter. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. March 12th, my 68th birthday. The morning rain tapped faintly against the windows of my kitchen, misting the glass and blurring the view of the empty garden where Henry once planted roses. The Bellevue sky hung heavy and gray, a reflection of the dull ache in my chest that had never quite left since Henry died. 8 years, and still the silence at breakfast screamed louder than any sound. I sat alone at the marble-top table across from a vacant chair I hadn't had the heart to move. The house, grand and tastefully quiet, no longer held warmth. It was a gallery of absence, a perfectly preserved void. I glanced at the phone beside my coffee. Daniel always texted before I even opened my eyes. A happy birthday, Mom, followed by some silly joke about getting old and a bouquet of sunflowers delivered to the front porch before noon. But not today. 9 a.m. passed. Still no message. My thumb hovered over his contact. I hesitated. Daniel was a doctor on call most nights. He might just be sleeping off a double shift. I told myself that. Told myself again. And again. I poured a cup of black coffee, no sugar the way Henry drank it. It tasted bitterer than usual. My toast sat untouched on the plate, the butter slowly melting into a quiet puddle. At 10:36 a.m. the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, a 206 area code. Seattle. Something twisted in my gut. Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, a man's voice, low and measured. "Yes, this is Officer Bell with Seattle PD. I'm afraid there's been an accident involving your son, Daniel Thompson." The words hung there, suspended in my kitchen, warping the air around them. My breath caught. No, you must be mistaken. There was a traffic collision early this morning. A vehicle ran a red light. Your son's car was struck on the driver's side. He died at the scene. I'm so sorry. Everything dropped my hand. The phone. The coffee mug, time itself. The ceramic shattered on the floor, but made no sound in my ears. Daniel. My Daniel. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I barely registered myself pressing the redial button, demanding they check again. His name, his age, his profession. They confirmed it all. There was no mistake. He was gone. Gone. I sat for what felt like hours, the silence of the house now unbearable. The walls seemed to close in on me. I stared at the empty chair across the table. For the first time in years, I wanted someone, anyone, to sit in it. Memories began to rise like floodwater. Daniel at 5, standing on a stool in this very kitchen, wearing a chef's apron 3 sizes too big, grinning as he smeared pancake batter all over the counter. Daniel, at 23, placing his stethoscope around my neck after his med school graduation. Daniel, at 43, hugging me tightly at the airport and whispering, "Promise me you'll live to at least 98, okay, Mom?" Now, I would have given every cent of the billions Henry left me just to hear that voice again. To argue over lunch. To nag him about getting more sleep. To laugh at how terrible he was at folding laundry. Instead, all I had was the voicemail. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the pine trees, I finally picked up my phone again. One unread voicemail, time-stamped 9:22 p.m. the night before. "Hey Mom, it's me. Just wanted to say happy birthday early. My shift's gonna be crazy tomorrow. I'll call when I'm out. Love you." His voice. So alive. So casual, so unaware. I broke. Not the soft kind of sobbing people do in movies. It was raw, silent, full-bodied grief. My chest convulsed. I curled into myself at the foot of the kitchen island and cried until I couldn't breathe. For the first time since Henry died, I wasn't just alone. I was empty. A week after Daniel's funeral, I returned to the Evergreen Hills Cemetery. I'd been every day since the service. Not out of ritual. I had nowhere else to go. No one else to sit with. I brought tulips. Yellow ones. His favorite. I remembered that from the bouquet he bought me on my 60th birthday. He said yellow meant joy. I didn't believe that anymore. The late afternoon sky had cleared, but the grass still glistened from a morning shower. Daniel's grave sat at the end of a row beneath a tall cedar tree. His photo stared back at me from the polished headstone, a younger version of him, head tilted slightly, the same smile he wore when he helped me set up Henry's home hospice bed. I knelt, whispered to him like he could hear. I told him how much I hated the silence of the house, how the board meetings felt hollow, how I regretted every single Sunday I didn't call him first. Then I heard them. Footsteps. Light and synchronized. 3 girls about 10 years old approached from the paved path. They wore matching school uniforms, navy skirts, white tights, pale blue sweaters. Each carried a small bundle of white chrysanthemums. They didn't notice me at first. Or if they did, they didn't care. They walked straight to Daniel's grave. The tallest one, brown hair tightly braided, stepped forward, knelt, and placed her flowers carefully beside my tulips. "We miss you, Daddy," she whispered. I stopped breathing. Another girl with a slight limp took her sister's hand. "Goodbye, Dad." The third girl, red-cheeked and quiet, leaned her head on the other's shoulder. I stood slowly. "Excuse me," I said, voice trembling. Did you say Daniel was your father?" They froze. All 3 turned to me, wide-eyed. The tallest one whispered something I couldn't make out. Then she grabbed the hands of the other 2 and tugged them toward the exit path. They didn't run, but they left fast, purposeful. Just before reaching the cemetery gate, the tall girl turned around and looked back. Her eyes, hazel flecked with gold. Daniel's eyes. I would have known them anywhere. I remained frozen. The wind barely stirred the trees, but my body shook. How Daniel had children. 3 of them. Triplets. He never told me. Not a single word. No photos. No names. No late-night confessions over wine. 10 years and not one mention. When I got home, I tore through my office. I opened every drawer, flipped through every file. Letters from Daniel. Medical records I kept from his childhood. Birthday cards. Nothing. No hint. Not even in the will he had me review 2 years ago. Just as I was about to give up, I opened the voicemail folder on my phone. There was a fragment only 4 seconds long. Static, then Daniel's voice. "Mom, if something happens to me." Then it cut off. I didn't sleep that night. The next afternoon, I returned to Evergreen Hills, sat on the same bench, waited. I wasn't sure for what, maybe a miracle, or maybe proof that I hadn't gone mad. They came again. Same uniforms, same flowers, but this time they weren't alone. A woman walked with them, early 50s, weary but composed, carrying an umbrella and a watchful gaze. The moment her eyes met mine, she stiffened. She grabbed the hand of the tall girl. "Come on, girls, time to go." But that's her. the girl said, not whispering this time. That's Daddy's mom. The woman's face tightened. She didn't speak to me, just nodded curtly and walked away with the children in tow. My feet wouldn't move. My voice caught in my throat. But my heart sprinted. They knew who I was. Daniel had told them about me, which meant he had never truly shut me out. He'd just protected something I hadn't even known existed. Until now. I arrived at Evergreen Hills just after 7. The morning fog hadn't lifted yet, and the dew clung to the bench like breath held too long. I sat there, hands folded over a bouquet of tulips that had started to droop at the edges, watching each figure pass by each birdland and take off again, all while time melted slowly behind me. 3 hours. I waited 3 hours before I saw them. Clara came first, same weary grace, same guarded posture. She held the umbrella low even though the drizzle had stopped. The girls flanked her in their uniforms, walking in silence, each holding white carnations this time. Grace saw me first. Her gaze didn't waver. She nudged her sisters gently and whispered something. Clara's head turned, eyes narrowing the moment they met mine. I stood, not moving toward them too quickly, not wanting to trigger that flight response I'd seen before. I'm not here to cause trouble, I said. I would like a conversation. That's all. Just us. Clara hesitated, grip tightening on the handle of the umbrella. Her shoulders stiffened. She opened her mouth, likely to refuse. But before she could speak, Grace stepped forward. Dioi, she said quietly, bo se kong muan ba noe dung duoi mua, the nai dao. It wasn't a plea. It was a statement of quiet conviction spoken with the same soft strength I'd once heard from Daniel when he was only 10, arguing that I should let a bird with a broken wing stay the night in our kitchen. Clara looked down at Grace, then back at me. Finally, she nodded. Beacon Diner, she said. 1 hour. I'll drive. The diner sat at a corner in Renton I'd never paid attention to before. Small, older than it looked from the outside, but well kept. Inside, the lighting was warm, the booths vinyl wrapped and peeling at the edges. Clara chose a seat by the window and told the girls they'd get milkshakes, but sit at the booth behind us. Before we spoke, Clara laid out her terms. No photos, no recordings, and I wasn't to ask about Daniel unless she brought him up. I nodded without protest. I was here to listen. She ordered coffee. No sugar. I asked for tea but didn't drink it. The heat of the cup was enough to anchor me. So she said, eyes fixed out the window, "You want to know who they are?" I turned slightly, glancing over my shoulder at the girls. Grace was helping Lily stir whipped cream into her milkshake. Sophia was coloring on a napkin. "They're Grace, Lily," and Sophia, Clara said evenly. "Your granddaughters, if you choose to believe that." The words landed like a slow explosion. I opened my mouth, closed it. I didn't ask for proof. I didn't ask how. I just said I do believe it. Clara finally looked at me then. Their mother's name was Laura, my sister. She died 4 years ago. I stared at her, stunned. So Daniel and Laura? Clara nodded before I could ask. They met at a fundraiser, fell in love. The usual story. She was my baby sister. Always stubborn, always soft in ways this world punishes. Her voice broke slightly on the last word, but she masked it quickly by taking a sip of coffee. I asked nothing else. I let the silence grow. I wanted her to fill it on her own terms. He didn't tell you about them, she said after a long moment, because he was scared. Scared of what it would do to you. To me, I repeated. Clara gave a short laugh that wasn't amusement at all. He said you were already drowning after Henry died, that if he added 3 more anchors to your grief, you might never come up for air again. I felt my chest tighten. I'd always thought Daniel was an open book. I'd always believed we had no secrets left between us. And Lily and Sophia, Clara added they carry the same genetic condition Laura had. Slowly progressive, muscular atrophy. Grace is clear. The other 2, well, he didn't want to burden you with that. I turned to look at the girls again. Lily's smile was wide, easy. Sophia leaned on her sister's shoulder, blinking slowly. They were so full of life. I would never have guessed. He should have told me, I whispered. Clara's expression didn't soften. He was trying to protect you. That's what he believed. And maybe he was protecting himself too. I nodded, unsure what to say. Then Grace appeared beside the booth, sliding into the seat next to me without asking. She looked up at me with her father's eyes. Botong noi, she said, banoy langwe punu man minnat. Nung me mat roinen bakan toy gyandetho. My hand went instinctively to cover hers. She didn't pull away. I left the diner with a weight I hadn't known was on me until then. But beneath it was something else. Something that flickered quietly behind my grief. A sense that maybe, just maybe, I hadn't lost everything. Not yet. Clara agreed to let me visit their home the following week. Just for an hour, she said. No promises. The girls want it more than I do. Renton was more modest than I remembered. Her house stood at the end of a block where lawns were kept low and kids' toys littered porches. The paint on the siding was chipped, but the garden was neatly trimmed. Inside was small but spotless. The living room smelled faintly of citrus and something floral. The girls' drawings covered the walls, crayon castles, rainbows, hearts with scribbled names. But one larger than the rest caught my eye. My family, it said, in uneven block letters. Below it, 6 figures stood side by side. Daniel was in the middle, holding hands with a woman I assumed was Laura. On the other side stood Clara, then the girls, and an empty space. I blinked, realizing the space wasn't blank. It had a soft outline, faint, but intentional. A woman with gray hair. Grace saw me looking. That was supposed to be you, she said. But Daddy said we'd draw the rest when the time was right. They gave me a homemade book bound with red thread. Our dad, Dr. Daniel, it said in colorful letters. I flipped through it, page after page of drawings. Daniel reading bedtime stories. Daniel pushing them on swings. Daniel cooking badly. It seemed based on the scribbled flames under the pan. There were drawings of a woman with brown hair, Laura, her arms around the girls in every picture. I felt my breath catch. The ache of missing him swelled, but something else grew alongside it. I didn't just see what I'd lost. I saw what he'd built, what I'd been kept from, what I still might join. Clara brought me tea and sat on the edge of the couch, not quite relaxed, not quite cold. Laura knew she had the gene Clara began. She was diagnosed at 25. The chances were high it'd pass on. Daniel told her they didn't have to try for children, but she wanted them anyway. She glanced at the girls who were now sprawled on the rug, drawing me in pastel. When the doctors confirmed Lily and Sophia had the gene Laura broke. She stopped painting, stopped laughing, but she never stopped loving them. I asked quietly, "How did she die?" Clara shook her head. "Another time." She paused. "Daniel paid for everything, the treatments, the caretakers, the schooling. But after Laura passed, he took it all on himself. He didn't want me to raise them alone. He didn't want them to feel they'd lost both parents. And yet, he never told me." Clara looked away. "He tried. Once." I frowned. "He made dinner plans with you. Grace's second birthday. He told me he was going to introduce you to them that night. Said he was nervous but hopeful. Then you canceled." My heart dropped. "You said you couldn't celebrate that day. That it was Henry's 70th birthday. And you didn't want any reminders." I closed my eyes. He took it as a sign. Said maybe next year. There was a stillness in the room then, so quiet it throbbed. Later, Grace took me to their room. She handed me an old tablet, its screen cracked but still working. "Daddy recorded stuff on here," she said. "We watch it when we miss him." She tapped a file. Daniel's face filled the screen. He was seated on the girls' bedbook in hand. His voice was warm even. He read to them about 3 princesses who built a kingdom together. At the end, he closed the book, kissed each forehead, then turned to the camera. "If one day I'm not here," he said, "remember this, your grandma is part of your blood. She's brave. She's just waiting for the right time." I didn't speak. I didn't move. When I left the room, I knelt and opened my arms. All 3 girls ran into them without hesitation. They smelled like crayons and strawberry shampoo. I held them like I'd never let go. From the kitchen doorway, Clara watched us. She didn't speak. But when I met her eyes, I saw the tears. Not loud, not theatrical. Just a quiet surrender. It was a quiet evening, The kind where the silence doesn't feel heavy, only patient. After a simple dinner of soup and toast, the girls retreated to the back room to work on a puzzle, their quiet voices drifting in and out like background music. Clara poured us both a cup of chamomile tea and sat across from me in the living room, her posture neither welcoming nor closed. It was neutral, cautious. "I'll tell you everything," she said, "but not because I expect you to do anything. I need you to understand Daniel. And I need you to understand why I kept the girls from you." She didn't wait for me to answer. Her gaze was steady, though her hands fidgeted slightly around the teacup. Laura was always different. She wasn't made for rules or the way the world demanded people fit into neat little boxes. She loved painting, hated structure, refused to go to college. Our parents hated that, called her irresponsible, wasteful. But she saw beauty in things most people overlooked. I nodded, staying silent. She met Daniel at a charity event, one of those art and health partnerships he always volunteered at. He was fascinated by her, said she was the first person who ever looked him in the eye without expecting anything. They fell in love faster than they should have, but it wasn't reckless, it was full. They talked for hours, built their own little world in this house. Clara looked around, her voice thinning. He moved in here, helped cover rent, helped buy groceries. She painted more in those first 2 years than she had in her whole life. I could see it, the warmth, the laughter, the mornings when Laura would stand by the window, brush in one hand, coffee in the other, Daniel reading a medical journal beside her. A life I never knew existed just a few miles from mine. Then she got pregnant. They were surprised, but they were ready, or they thought they were. When the tests came back, when they told her Lily and Sophia had the gene, Clara stopped. Her hands tightened around the teacup. She was devastated. She didn't want to bring suffering into the world. She blamed herself. "And Grace?" I asked softly. Clear. No gene detected. But it didn't ease her guilt. Clara took a breath, then continued. "After the girls were born, Laura declined fast. She couldn't hold them for long, couldn't chase them, couldn't paint. Her muscles weakened more rapidly than anyone predicted. She tried to hide it for a while, but Daniel saw everything." I swallowed hard. "Why didn't he tell me?" She looked up, eyes sharp. "Because you had just lost your husband. You were barely speaking to anyone. Daniel said you stopped answering the phone some days. He didn't want to pile on something you couldn't carry. He told Laura, 'Mom needs to breathe first, then I'll bring her in.' But he never did." Her voice broke slightly. "Because Laura died." I sat straighter. "From the illness?" Clara shook her head. "No, from the weight. I didn't move. She took her own life." The words settled like dust in my throat. I couldn't speak, couldn't process. "She left a note," Clara whispered. "Said she couldn't bear to watch the girls grow up knowing they inherited her pain. She was terrified that one day Daniel would break too. That you'd never forgive him, that the world would forget her." Clara stood and walked to a small cabinet by the window. She returned with a folded piece of paper. "I wasn't going to show you this, but I think it's time." I opened it with trembling fingers. It wasn't a full letter, just one line written in a loopy, tired hand. "She loved until it broke her." An hour later, Clara drove us to Green Valley Cemetery. The sun had dipped low, casting the sky in amber. We walked in silence to a modest headstone surrounded by violets. "Laura Thompson, 1983-2017. She loved until it broke her." I knelt beside the grave and ran my fingers along the etched words. I didn't cry, I didn't speak, I just sat with her. Sat with all the things I never knew. All the moments Daniel had carried alone. All the silence I'd mistaken for distance. The next morning, I took the girls to their routine neurology checkup. The waiting room smelled sterile and faintly lemony. Lily clutched my hand the entire time. Sophia curled into Clara's side. Grace read aloud from a book, her voice calm and sure. When Dr. Lee came in, his face was grave. "The disease is progressing," he said, "faster than we hoped. Without intervention, both Lily and Sophia may lose full mobility within 5 years." Clara leaned forward. "What options do we have?" "There's a clinical trial in Boston," he said. "They're doing cutting-edge work. It's not a cure, but it could slow the progression. Give them more time. Better quality of life. He explained the conditions: 6 to 8 months in Boston, daily treatments, expensive, rigorous, exhausting. Insurance wouldn't cover most of it. As we left the center, the girls piled into the back seat. Grace opened her book again. Lily leaned her head on the window. Sophia dozed, breathing unevenly. I sat in the passenger seat, hands clenched in my lap. This was the moment. Daniel had kept them from me to spare me the pain. But if I turned away now, if I walked back to Bellevue and left Clara to bear this alone, I wouldn't just be repeating history. I would be breaking it. 3 nights later, I invited Clara to sit with me after dinner. The girls were drawing in their shared bedroom, giggling over who could sketch a better version of their cat. I want to take everyone to Boston, I said carefully. I'll cover the costs: housing, transportation, medical bills, tutoring. Anything you and the girls need. Clara didn't answer at first. She stared into her tea, stirring it with a spoon that clinked against the cup far longer than needed. Why, she asked. Because I can. And because I have to. Because Daniel would have wanted it. She raised an eyebrow. And what do you want? The question stopped me. What did I want? Redemption, purpose, to be needed again. I want to be part of their lives, I said. Not just their past, their future. Clara nodded slowly. I'll think about it. I need a day. I understood. It wasn't about the money. It was about trust, about role, about boundaries. I'd lived my life managing people, negotiating power. But this wasn't business. This was family. And family didn't come with contracts or guarantees. The next morning at my office in Seattle, I had my lawyer draw up a temporary financial guardianship form, just a procedural safeguard to transfer funds for the hospital. I tucked the folder into my bag without much thought. That evening at Clara's house, I placed my purse on the counter while helping Sophia with her sweater. Clara reached for a napkin and accidentally knocked the folder free. She picked it up, flipped it open. Her face paled. What is this? She asked sharply. I turned. It's just a funding agreement. This looks like a custody clause, she said. You're preparing to take them from me? No, I said. It's a legal form. You're doing exactly what you did to Daniel, using your power, your money, your influence to control people. You didn't raise those girls. You don't get to take them now just because you wrote a check. Her voice rose sharp enough to make the girls freeze in the hallway. Then Grace stepped between us. Her hands trembled. If you keep fighting, we won't go. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the room like glass. Clara closed her eyes. I stepped back. Neither of us spoke, because in that moment we saw what we'd become: 2 women arguing over love, both too wounded to see the other was trying to give it. Later that night, Clara came to find me in the backyard. She sat beside me on the porch swing, knees pulled to her chest. I'm tired, she said. So tired. I thought I could carry all this alone, but I'm breaking. I didn't answer. I only reached out, not to take control, but to hold her hand. We can do this together, I said. No titles, no conditions. Just 2 women who love 3 kids more than they love their pride. She didn't respond, but when I checked on her later that night, her door was cracked open. I heard her crying, the kind of cry that's been held back for years. The next morning, Clara handed me a piece of paper. A list. It detailed what she expected in Boston: medical needs, educational access, routine schedules, emotional boundaries. At the bottom, she'd written, if you're doing this for them, not for appearance, not for guilt, then I'm ready. I folded the paper carefully, looked her in the eye, and said, I'm doing it for all of us. A week passed quickly. The checklist grew longer. Each day, medical documents, consent forms, luggage, medications, travel insurance. I oversaw it all with the efficiency of someone who had once run a multinational fund. But this was different. I wasn't managing a crisis. I was preparing a family for a leap they never asked for, but desperately needed. We departed from Seattle Tacoma International on a gray morning that looked almost identical to the one when I turned 68. But this time, the silence in the air was filled with something else. Anticipation, fear, maybe even hope. I'd arranged for a medical professional to fly with us just in case. I booked a private car to avoid the stress of airport crowds. I even upgraded all 5 of us to first class, though. Clara hesitated when she saw the tickets. I could have flown coach, she said, smoothing her skirt, one I'd picked out for her during our last shopping trip. She'd allowed it only because the girls insisted on matching dresses for Boston. I know, I replied, but you shouldn't have to. She didn't argue further, but her silence was tight. We were still orbiting each other, never quite in sync. Like two people holding different pieces of the same puzzle, unsure of how to begin fitting them together. The flight took off without incident. The girls, exhilarated by the novelty, played games and pressed their faces to the windows. Clara kept her eye on Lily and Sophia, attentive but calm. I watched them more than I watched the clouds. Midway through the flight, Lily began to tremble. Her muscles locked up and she let out a soft whimper. I panicked. My hands shook as I reached for her, unsure of what to do. Clara moved in, quick and composed. She sat beside Lily, gently massaging the girl's arms, whispering calming words matching her breathing. Within minutes, the tremors eased. I sat frozen, helpless. After Lily fell asleep, I found myself looking out the window, ashamed. I had money, access, resources. But I had lost something else along the way: presence. The ability to mother in the moment, not through planning or provisioning, but through closeness. Later in the car on the way to the hotel, Grace reached into my coat pocket. "Is this Daniel?" she asked, holding up my locket. I nodded. She studied the photograph inside, then looked up at me. "Banoy," she said, "Chao so nobo konsong bo sete bavadinu haidoi kaknao. Boget kika na chiafe." I didn't respond. I took the necklace from her hand, unlatched it, and gently placed it around her neck. "I think he'd want you to wear this now," I said. That night, we checked into the temporary apartment I'd rented near the hospital. 3 bedrooms, modest but warm. The girls chose theirs instantly. Clara unpacked with precision, moving like someone who didn't want to settle too deeply. At midnight, I heard a knock on my door. It was Grace. "I had a dream," she whispered. I pulled her in gently. "What kind of dream, bo dungoekwa? Bo koi vanoi, kaman konda dua badende. Roy, bo, bien, mat." She crawled into bed beside me and fell asleep, holding my hand. I didn't sleep at all. Sometime before dawn, I drifted into a half-sleep and found myself on a wooden bench in a quiet park. Daniel sat beside me, young and calm. He didn't speak. He just smiled. And in that smile, I felt everything he never said: that I was late, but not too late. We arrived at the hospital the next morning for the girls' first treatment. The building was brighter than I expected. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. The staff welcomed us with gentle kindness, explaining every step clearly. Clara asked sharp questions. I stayed close but let her lead. As we waited in the pediatric lounge, Grace pointed to a large mural on the wall. 3 children holding hands with 2 women standing in a circle. Above them, the words, "It takes all of us to stay alive." She looked at me and smiled. That day, I began to understand what it meant to show up not as a benefactor, not as a mother trying to make up for lost time, but simply as someone willing to stay. 4 weeks into treatment routine had become our safety net. Mornings at the hospital, afternoons with tutors, evenings reading stories, preparing gentle meals, watching Lily and Sophia shift between energy and exhaustion. Clara and I moved more fluidly now, handing off responsibilities with small nods, unspoken rhythms we'd begun to share. Dr. Lee called us in for a progress update. Sophia was responding better than expected. Her strength had improved, her coordination more stable. Lily was slower, more fragile, but still within range to continue. "There's reason to be cautiously optimistic," he said. Afterward, Clara lingered beside the hospital garden, her arms folded. I knew that look. Doubt edged with guilt. "They want to extend the treatment cycle another 4 months," she said. "More meds, more tests, more cost." "I know," I replied. She turned to face me. "If it becomes too much, if you get tired or decide this isn't worth it, will you walk away?" I didn't flinch. I looked toward the play area where Grace was pushing her sisters on a swing. "No," I said. "Daniel didn't walk away, and neither will I. I made him a promise the day I buried him. I just didn't know it yet." That evening, I made a decision. I contacted my foundation team and scheduled an emergency video call with a few key board members and donors. In the small office corner of our apartment, I sat before the screen, my fingers steady. I want to create something permanent, I told them. A foundation in Daniel's name, to support families dealing with rare pediatric illnesses, treatment, housing, education, everything. They listened. Some raised concerns. But I was prepared. I'll fund the launch myself, I said. $5 million to start, no strings. The room went quiet. I had expected to feel a twinge of uncertainty. I didn't. Only clarity. For the first time, the money didn't feel like a burden to justify or a tool to fix things. It felt like something that could finally serve a deeper purpose. That night, we ate dinner together in the apartment. Lily laughed for the first time in days. Sophia fell asleep at the table, her spoon still in hand. Clara looked across the table at me and without a word reached out, gently wrapped her fingers around mine. Lily blinked sleepily. No tui con koi ben. Min se song kung nao mai ha. I couldn't speak. Clara and I exchanged a glance. I only nodded. That was enough. After the girls went to bed, Grace handed me their paper book again. We added a new page, she said. It showed our family sitting around a table. Clara, the girls, and me. Underneath, in bright block letters, our family got bigger. Later that night, I opened Daniel's old notebook. It still had some of his scribbles formulas, to-do lists, a sketch of a toy he once wanted to invent for Grace. I slipped a letter into the back pocket. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. I wrote, "You thought love would break me, but it's what's kept me standing." Then I closed the book and placed it on my nightstand. I wasn't just keeping a promise anymore. I was learning how to live with it. Sometimes life doesn't shatter all at once. It erodes quietly, painfully, until love finds a way back in. And when it doesn't fix everything. But it reminds us that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to stay open even when it hurts. If this story touched you in any way, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, or simply share it with someone who might need it. Thank you for listening.